The stars outside the window looked like scattered diamonds against black velvet. Commander Daniel Hayes stood alone on the observation deck of the Earth Alliance vessel Starbound Hope, watching as the ship prepared to exit hyperspace. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his face showed no emotion, but inside his chest, his heart beat faster than the usual. This was the most important mission of his life. Perhaps the most important mission in human history. The Valorian Empire had finally agreed to meet with humanity. For 30 years, humans had sent messages into the void, hoping that the powerful alien civilization would respond. The Valorians controlled 17 star systems. They had technology that made human science look like children playing with toys. A single Valorian medical device could cure diseases that killed millions of humans every year. Their ships could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. And now, after 3 decades of silence, they had agreed to talk. Daniel was not a diplomat. He had grown up on a small colony world called New Montana, where life was hard, and every meal had to be earned through honest work. His father had been a farmer. His mother had been an engineer who kept the colony's aging machines running with nothing but skill and determination. Daniel had joined the Earth Alliance Navy at 18, served in 3 border conflicts, and risen through the ranks because he was honest, capable, and never quit. The Alliance Council had chosen him for this mission because they believed the Valorians would respect his straightforward nature. Intelligence reports suggested that the ancient empire hated liars and political games. They wanted someone real, someone genuine. Daniel hoped the reports were right. The door behind him slid open, and 3 people entered the observation deck. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos was his tactical officer, a sharp woman with dark eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Kevin Park was the mission's language expert, a quiet man who had spent 20 years studying every scrap of Valorian communication humanity had ever intercepted. Ensign Laura Mitchell was the youngest member of the team, only 24 years old. But she was the best communication specialist in the fleet. "We drop out of hyperspace in 10 minutes. "Commander," Maria said. Daniel nodded without turning around. "Everyone ready?" "As ready as we can be," Kevin answered. His voice carried a slight tremor. "I've reviewed all my notes 100 times. I think I can handle basic conversation, but their language has subtleties that are difficult to grasp." "Just do your best," Daniel said. "That's all any of us can do." Laura moved to stand beside him at the window. She was trying to hide her nervousness, but Daniel could see her fingers tapping against her leg. "Commander, what do you think they'll be like?" "The Valorians, I mean." "In person." Daniel considered the question. "I don't know. Every species we've met has surprised us in some way. I expect they'll be proud. They've been around for thousands of years. That kind of history tends to make civilizations think highly of themselves. Hopefully they'll see the value in working with us." Maria said. "Hopefully," Daniel agreed. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace. The scattered stars suddenly resolved into a new configuration, and there, hanging in the darkness like a blue and silver jewel, was Valoria Prime. It was the most beautiful planet Daniel had ever seen. The surface sparkled with what looked like billions of tiny lights. Massive structures rose from the continents, towers so tall they seemed to pierce the atmosphere itself. Floating cities drifted among the clouds, connected by graceful bridges that arced across impossible distances. "Oh my God," Laura whispered. Even Maria, who rarely showed emotion, drew in a sharp breath. Daniel felt his own sense of awe, but he pushed it down. This was not the time to be overwhelmed. He had a job to do. Within minutes, Valorian escort vessels surrounded the Starbound Hope. They were sleek and elegant, shaped like silver teardrops, and they moved with a precision that made human ships look clumsy in comparison. The escorts began scanning the human vessel with sensors so powerful that Daniel could feel a strange tingling sensation across his skin. "They're being very thorough," Kevin observed. "They're making a point," Daniel replied. "They want us to know how advanced they are compared to us." The escorts guided them toward a massive orbital station. The Starboard Hope docked, and Daniel led his team to the airlock. On the other side, they found a group of Valorian soldiers waiting for them. The Valorians were tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. They wore flowing robes over what appeared to be lightweight armor. Their expressions were blank, revealing nothing. "You will come with us," one of them said in heavily accented English. "The Queen will see you when she is ready." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Thank you. We are honored by this opportunity." The Valorian did not respond. He simply turned and began walking. They were taken to the planet's surface by a small shuttle that moved so smoothly Daniel could barely tell they were flying. The Imperial Palace was even more impressive up close, a structure of crystal and light that seemed to grow from the ground like a living thing. Inside, the corridors stretched in every direction, filled with artwork and treasures that represented 12,000 years of Valorian history. But the humans were not given a tour. They were led to a small room with bare walls and no furniture. The door closed behind them. "Wait here," the Valorian guard said through a small speaker. "You will be summoned." And so they waited. 1 hour passed. Then 2, then 3. Daniel sat on the floor, his back against the wall, conserving his energy. Maria paced like a caged animal. Kevin reviewed his notes obsessively. Laura stood by the door, hoping it would open. 4 hours. 5, 6. "This is ridiculous," Maria finally snapped. "They're treating us like prisoners." "They're testing us," Daniel said calmly. "They want to see how we react to disrespect. Will we get angry? Will we complain? Will we leave? So what do we do?" Daniel looked at her with steady eyes. "We wait. We show them that humans have patience. We show them that we take this seriously." Maria looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded and leaned against the wall beside him. When the door finally opened, Daniel rose to his feet. His legs were stiff, his stomach was empty, and his mouth was dry. But his face showed nothing but calm determination. "The Queen will see you now," the guard announced. Daniel straightened his uniform and stepped forward. Whatever happened next, he was ready. The throne room was the largest indoor space Daniel had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into clouds, actual clouds that drifted lazily far overhead. The floor was polished so perfectly that it reflected everything like a mirror, making it seem as though they were walking on air above an endless drop. Massive pillars lined both sides of the chamber, each one carved with scenes from Valorian history. And at the far end, raised on a platform of white stone, sat the throne. It was cut from a single gemstone the size of a small house, purple and shimmering with internal light. Upon it sat Queen Lyriel of the Valorian Empire. She was young. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. The intelligence reports had mentioned that she was only 26 years old, having inherited the throne after her mother's sudden death 2 years ago. She had the same pale blue skin as her people, but her eyes were a deeper violet, almost purple, and they watched the approaching humans with cold curiosity. Around her stood dozens of advisors, ancient Valorians whose faces showed the weight of centuries. They whispered among themselves as Daniel and his team walked the long path toward the throne. The walk took nearly 5 minutes. Daniel kept his eyes forward, his pace steady, his expression calm. He could feel the weight of thousands of Valorian eyes upon him, judging him, measuring him. When he finally reached the base of the platform, he stopped and bowed deeply from the waist. His team did the same behind him. "Your Majesty," Daniel said, his voice clear and respectful, "on behalf of Earth and all her colonies, I thank you for granting us this audience. Humanity comes to you in peace, seeking friendship and partnership between our peoples." Queen Lyriel did not respond immediately. She studied Daniel as one might study an insect pinned to a board, with detached interest and no warmth whatsoever. So, she finally said, "These are the humans." She turned to one of her advisors. "I expected more." Daniel felt Maria stiffen beside him, but he kept his own composure. "We are a young species, Your Majesty. We have much to learn, but we believe we also have much to offer. Do you?" The Queen's voice dripped with amusement. "And what exactly do you believe you have to offer the Valorian Empire?" Daniel had prepared for this question. "We bring samples of our art, our music, our literature. We bring scientific research that represents humanity's best achievements. We bring proposals for trade that would benefit both our peoples. And most importantly, we bring our friendship, freely given without conditions." The Queen laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Friendship," she repeated, as if the word was ridiculous. "You speak of friendship as though it were something valuable. Tell me, human, what is your species worth? 100 years among the stars? 200? The Valorian Empire has existed for 12,000 years. We had built cities when your ancestors were still living in caves. The age of a civilization does not determine its value," Daniel replied carefully. "Every species has something unique to contribute." Pretty words. The Queen rose from her throne and descended the steps slowly, her flowing robes trailing behind her. The court fell absolutely silent. "But words are cheap, are they not?" She stopped directly in front of Daniel, so close he could have reached out and touched her. Her violet eyes bore into his, searching for weakness. "We have studied your kind," she said softly. "We have watched you for centuries, since before you left your homeworld. We have seen what you truly are. And what are we, Your Majesty?" The Queen smiled, but there was no kindness in it. "You are children playing at being adults. Your technology is primitive. Your culture is crude and violent. You fight among yourselves constantly, destroying what little you manage to build. You breed without restraint and spread across every world you touch like a disease." Daniel heard Lavra gasp behind him. Kevin made a small sound of distress. Maria's hand moved toward her hip where her weapon would normally be, finding nothing, but Daniel remained still. He said nothing. His face showed nothing. The Queen leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow still carried through the silent hall. "You are insects, Commander Hayes, vermin. Your species exists because we have not bothered to exterminate you. And you come here, to our palace, offering us friendship as if you were our equals?" She straightened and turned to address her court, her voice rising. "This is what humans are. Look at them. Weak, simple, inferior in every way that matters. They build their little ships and explore their little corner of the galaxy and think themselves important. They know nothing of true power, true civilization, true greatness." The Valorian advisors watched with various expressions. Some nodded in approval. Others looked uncomfortable. But none spoke against their queen. Lyriel turned back to Daniel. Her beautiful face was twisted with contempt. "Go home, human. Go back to your dirty little worlds and your short little lives. Tell your leaders that the Valorian Empire has no interest in alliances with vermin. Tell them that we will never see you as equals. Tell them that you are beneath us. You have always been beneath us, and you will always be beneath us." She stepped back, satisfied with her speech, waiting for the human to react. Daniel looked at her. He looked at her advisors. He looked around the magnificent throne room, at the towering pillars in the clouded ceiling and the mirror floor. Then, without saying a single word, he turned and walked toward the door. "Commander?" Laura's voice was confused and frightened. Daniel did not stop. He did not look back. He simply walked, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. "Human!" The Queen's voice rang out, sharp with surprise and sudden anger. "I did not give you permission to leave. You will stop this instant." Daniel kept walking. "Guards! Stop him!" But Daniel and his team had already reached the great doors. They swung open, and the humans passed through them without pausing. "You cannot ignore me!" Queen Lyriel screamed, her voice losing its composure for the first time. "I am the Queen of the Valorian Empire. You will answer me. You will apologize. You will kneel." The doors closed behind Daniel, cutting off her words. Maria caught up to him in the corridor, her face flushed with emotion. "Commander, what are we doing? Where are we going?" Daniel's voice was calm and steady. "We're leaving, but the mission is over." He looked at her, and for just a moment, she saw the pain in his eyes, the disappointment, the anger that he kept carefully controlled. "There's nothing for us here." They walked through the crystal halls in silence. The Valorian guards watched them go, but did not try to stop them. Within an hour, they were back aboard the Starboard Hope. Within 2 hours, they had left Valorian space. Daniel stood on the observation deck, watching the stars blur as the ship entered hyperspace. He had come offering friendship. He had come with hope in his heart. He was leaving with neither, but he still had his dignity. He still had his silence. And sometimes that was the most powerful response of all. When the Starboard Hope returned to Earth, Daniel Hayes expected to be punished. He had abandoned humanity's most important diplomatic mission. He had walked out on the Queen of the most powerful empire in known space. He had done so without consulting his superiors, without asking permission, without even trying to salvage the situation. Instead, he found himself standing before the Earth Alliance Council, facing a room divided. "This is a disaster," Senator Gregory Burke shouted, his face red with anger. "Commander Hayes has single-handedly destroyed our chance at an alliance with the Valorians. He should be court-martialed and removed from service immediately. And what would you have had him do?" Admiral Patricia Cole responded. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "Grovel? Beg? Accept humiliation on behalf of all humanity? If that's what it took, yes." Admiral Cole stood from her seat. "Then you misunderstand what it means to be human, Senator. We do not kneel to those who call us vermin. We never have. We never will." The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted Daniel punished. Others wanted him promoted. In the end, they reached a compromise that satisfied no one. Daniel would keep his rank, but he would not be given any high-profile assignments. He was sent to patrol the outer colonies, far from Earth, far from politics, far from Valorian space. Daniel accepted the assignment without complaint. He had said everything he needed to say in that throne room, and he had said it by saying nothing at all. Meanwhile, on Valoria Prime, Queen Lyriel waited for the humans to return. It had been a week since the incident. Surely, she thought, they were simply gathering their courage. Surely, they were preparing a more appropriate delegation, one that would offer proper apologies and beg for another chance. "Any communications from Earth?" she asked her high advisor, an ancient Valorian named Torvan. "Nothing, Your Majesty. Nothing?" Lyriel frowned. "Not even a formal protest? A diplomatic complaint?" Complete silence. The Queen waved her hand dismissively. "They are probably still recovering from the shock. Humans are emotional creatures. Give them time." A month passed. Still nothing. Lyriel began to feel a strange sensation she had never experienced before: uncertainty. She had been raised to believe that the Valorian Empire was the greatest power in the galaxy. She had been taught that other species would always seek their favor, always try to earn their approval, always fear their displeasure. But the humans were not seeking favor. They were not apologizing. They were not afraid. They were simply gone. Perhaps we should send a delegation to Earth, Torvin suggested cautiously, to remind them of the opportunity they are missing. Absolutely not, Lyriel snapped. We do not chase after inferior species. They will come to us when they realize their mistake. But 6 months passed, and the humans did not come. A year passed. Then 2. Then 5. Lyriel grew from a young queen into a mature ruler. She dealt with the daily business of the empire, managed trade disputes, oversaw military operations, negotiated with other alien civilizations. But always, in the back of her mind, the silence from Earth bothered her like a splinter she could not remove. She began to pay more attention to intelligence, reports about humanity. What she learned disturbed her. The humans were not falling apart. They were not begging other powers for help. They were not crawling back to Valoria to apologize. They were growing. New human colonies appeared every year. Their population increased rapidly. Their ships, while still primitive by Valorian standards, improved with each generation. They formed trade agreements with dozens of smaller species, the ones the Empire had always ignored as too insignificant to bother with. They're building something, Torvan reported. A coalition of minor species with humanity at its center. A coalition? Lyriel laughed, but the sound was hollow. Of vermin? What threat could such an alliance possibly pose? But as the years passed, the answer became clear. 10 years after Daniel Hayes walked out of the throne room, the Coalition of Free Worlds was formally established. Humanity and 37 other species signed a treaty of mutual defense and cooperation. The Coalition's combined fleet was small compared to the Valorian Navy, but it was growing. 15 years after the incident, the Coalition's economy had grown to nearly half the size of the Valorian Empire's. Human technology, driven by necessity and determination, was closing the gap with Valorian science. They had developed new propulsion systems, new medical treatments, new agricultural methods, and they shared everything with their allies. Why would they do that? Lyriel asked Torvan, genuinely confused. When we develop new technology, we guard it carefully. We use it to maintain our advantage over lesser species. Torvan was silent for a long moment. Perhaps, Your Majesty, they do not see their allies as lesser species. The words hung in the air between them. 20 years after the incident, the Coalition of Free Worlds had become a true power in the galaxy. Their fleet now rivaled the Valorian Navy. Their economy had surpassed the Empire's. Their scientists, working together from dozens of different species, were producing innovations that even Valorian researchers admired. And still, they said nothing to the Valorian Empire. When Coalition merchants encountered Valorian traders at neutral stations, they were polite but distant, professional. They conducted their business and left without attempting to build relationships. The silence was deafening. Lyriel was 46 years old now. The advisors who had encouraged her youthful arrogance were dead or retired. New advisors surrounded her, and they looked at her with eyes that held a question they dared not ask. What have you done? She thought often of that day in the throne room. She remembered the human commander's face as she had insulted his species. She remembered the calm in his eyes, the stillness in his body, the dignity with which he had turned and walked away. At the time, she had thought his silence was weakness. Now she understood that it had been the most powerful response he could have given. He had not argued with her. He had not tried to change her mind. He had simply shown her, through his actions, what humanity truly valued. Not power, not dominance, not revenge, dignity, self-respect, the refusal to accept humiliation, no matter the cost. And now, 20 years later, that silent response was echoing through the galaxy. Lyriel sat alone in her throne room, the great chamber empty and quiet. She stared at the doors through which Daniel Hayes had walked so many years ago. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to regret. The Korthan Dominion came from the far edge of the galaxy, from regions of space that neither the Valorian Empire nor the Coalition of Free Worlds had ever explored. They were conquerors, destroyers. They swept through system after system, consuming resources, enslaving populations, and leaving nothing but dead worlds in their wake. For generations, they had been too far away to matter. Now they were close enough to threaten everyone. Queen Lyriel stood in her war room, surrounded by military advisors and holographic displays showing the advancing Korthan fleets. The situation was dire. The Korthans had already taken 11 systems that bordered Valorian space. Their forces were vast, their technology formidable, and their hunger for conquest seemed endless. "We cannot fight them alone," Admiral Severin said bluntly. He was the commander of the Valorian Navy, a veteran of countless battles, and he had never spoken to his queen with such directness before. "Your Majesty, our fleet is powerful, but the Korthans outnumber us 3-1. If we engage them without allies, we will be destroyed." Lyriel's jaw tightened. "And what allies do you suggest?" "The minor species we have ignored for centuries. The civilizations we have dismissed as beneath our notice." Severin hesitated. "There is one power in the galaxy that might stand with us. One power that has both the strength and the motivation to fight the Korthans." He did not need to say the name. Everyone in the room knew who he meant. The Coalition of Free Worlds, humanity, and their allies. For a long moment, Lyriel said nothing. Her mind traveled back 20 years, to a young queen standing in her throne room, hurling insults at a human commander who had only wanted friendship. She remembered every cruel word she had spoken. She remembered calling them insects, vermin, disease. She remembered the silence of his response. "They will never help us," she said quietly. "Not after what I did." "We must try, Your Majesty," Torvan urged. He was old now, his movements slow and his voice weak, but he had remained at her side through the decades. "If we do not ask, we doom our people to certain destruction." Lyriel closed her eyes. Pride had always been her greatest strength. Now it might become the weapon that destroyed her empire. "Send a delegation," she said finally. "Offer them whatever they want. Trade agreements, technology sharing, full diplomatic recognition, anything." The Valorian delegation arrived on Earth 3 weeks later. They were received courteously, shown to comfortable quarters, and given every standard diplomatic privilege. But they were not given an answer. Weeks passed. The Korthans continued their advance. The Valorian ambassador sent increasingly desperate messages back to Valoria Prime. "The humans are not refusing us," he reported. "But they are not agreeing either. They say they are considering our proposal. They ask us to be patient." Patient? The word felt like a knife in Lyriel's heart. 20 years ago, she had made the humans wait for 6 hours in an empty room. Now they were making her wait for months while an enemy army approached her borders. She understood the message. She deserved the message. Finally, after 3 months of waiting, the humans responded. They would send a representative to meet with Queen Lyriel directly. The meeting would take place on Valoria Prime. Lyriel spent days preparing for the encounter. She practiced apologies in front of mirrors. She memorized speeches about cooperation and mutual respect. She ordered the throne room cleaned and decorated with fresh flowers and soft lighting. She even had the barren waiting room where the humans had been held transformed into a comfortable lounge with fine furniture and refreshments. When the human vessel arrived in Valorian space, Lyriel did something that no Valorian ruler had done in 12,000 years. She went to the landing bay personally to greet the visitors. She stood on the platform, surrounded by her advisors and guards, watching as the coalition ship descended through the atmosphere. It was a sleek vessel, elegant in its own way, bearing the marks of technology developed by humans and their allies working together. The ship landed. The ramp lowered Dot, and Daniel Hayes walked down to meet her. He was old now. His hair had turned gray, and his face was lined with decades of service. He walked more slowly than he had 20 years ago, and he leaned slightly on a cane. But his eyes were the same, calm, steady, unbowed. Behind him came 3 others. Lyriel recognized them from intelligence reports. Admiral Maria Santos, now one of the most respected military commanders in the coalition, Dr. Kevin Park, whose work in xenolinguistics had made communication between coalition species possible, and Laura Mitchell, no longer a young ensign but a senior diplomat who had helped negotiate the formation of the coalition itself. Daniel stopped a few meters from the Queen. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. "Commander Hayes," Lyriel began. Her voice cracked slightly, and she had to start again. "Commander Hayes, I want to thank you for coming." Daniel nodded slowly. "Your Majesty, I have prepared a formal reception. There are refreshments and comfortable rooms, and that won't be necessary," Daniel said. His voice was polite but firm. "We have limited time. The Corthans are advancing. If there is to be an alliance, it must be decided quickly." Lyriel felt her carefully prepared speeches crumbling in her mind. This was not how she had imagined the conversation would go. "Of course," she said. "Please, come to the throne room. We can discuss the terms there." She led them through the palace corridors. The walk seemed longer than she remembered, and she was painfully aware of Daniel's slow, steady footsteps behind her. 20 years ago, she had made him walk this path as a supplicant. Now she felt like the supplicant herself. The throne room doors opened, and they entered the great chamber. Lyriel had planned to sit on her throne, but at the last moment, she changed her mind. She stood at the base of the platform, at the same level as the humans. "Commander Hayes," she said, "before we discuss any alliance, I must say something." Daniel waited. 20 years ago, I said terrible things to you. I called your people insects, vermin. I treated you with contempt and cruelty. I was young, and I was arrogant, and I was wrong." She paused, struggling to maintain her composure. "I have thought about that day many times. I have wished I could take back my words. I have regretted my actions more than you can possibly know." Daniel listened without interrupting. His face revealed nothing. "I am not asking for forgiveness," Lyriel continued. "I know I have not earned it. I am only asking for a chance to prove that I have changed. A chance to build the relationship I should have built 2 decades ago." She stopped speaking. The throne room fell silent. Daniel looked at her for a long time. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a data tablet, which he handed to Lara. The diplomat stepped forward and offered it to the Queen. "This is the Coalition's proposal," Daniel said. "Read it carefully. Consider it honestly. Give us your answer when you are ready." Lyriel took the tablet with trembling hands. "And what does the proposal contain?" "Everything," Daniel replied simply. "A mutual defense pact against the Corthans. Trade agreements. Technology sharing. Cultural exchange. Everything we offered you 20 years ago, and more." Lyriel stared at him in disbelief. "You would still offer us all this? After everything I did?" Daniel's expression softened just slightly. "We would. But not because we have forgotten, Your Majesty. We offer this because it is the right thing to do. Your people are facing annihilation. Your children, your artists, your dreamers, they did not insult us in that throne room. They do not deserve to die for your mistakes." He stepped closer, and for a moment, Lyriel saw a glimpse of the young commander who had stood in this very spot 20 years ago. Humanity believes in second chances, he said. We believe that people can change, that civilizations can grow. We believe that the future does not have to be defined by the mistakes of the past. He turned and began walking toward the door. Commander Hayes, Lyriel called after him. Wait, please. He stopped but did not turn around. Why did you come back? She asked. Of all the people in the coalition, why you? Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he looked back over his shoulder. Because I wanted you to know, he said quietly. The silence was never about punishing you. It was about waiting. Waiting for you to be ready to hear what we really had to say. He walked out of the throne room, leaving Lyriel alone with her advisors and the weight of 20 years of regret. But for the first time in decades, she also felt something else. Hope. The next morning, Queen Lyriel signed the treaty. She did not negotiate. She did not ask for changes. She simply read through the document that Daniel Hayes had provided, found it fair and reasonable, and put her name at the bottom. Her advisors were stunned. The old Lyriel would have spent weeks demanding better terms, asserting Valorian superiority, trying to gain every possible advantage. This new Lyriel simply accepted what was offered. Your Majesty, one advisor protested, surely we should ask for more favorable conditions. The Valorian Empire has much to offer. We should negotiate from a position of strength. Lyriel looked at him with tired eyes. We are not in a position of strength. We are in a position of need. And after 20 years of silence from humanity, we are lucky they are willing to talk to us at all. She summoned Daniel Hayes and his team back to the palace. This time, she had refreshments prepared, comfortable seats arranged, and musicians playing soft music in the background. She wanted them to feel welcome. She wanted them to know that things would be different now. When Daniel arrived, he looked at the changes in the room and nodded slightly. Thank you for the hospitality, Your Majesty. It is the least I can do. Lyriel handed him the signed treaty. I accept your terms. All of them. Daniel took the document and examined the signature. A small smile crossed his weathered face. This is a good first step. First step? Lyriel felt a flutter of anxiety. I thought the treaty covered everything. It covers the formal agreement. But treaties are just words on paper. What matters is what we build together in the years to come. Daniel looked around the room at the Valorian advisors, at the elegant decorations, at the Queen herself. The Corthans are still coming. We will need to work together, truly work together, if we hope to stop them. Over the following months, Daniel remained on Valoria Prime as the Coalition's chief ambassador to the Empire. He was old, and his health was failing, but he insisted on being present for the first stages of the Alliance. He said it was important that the same person who had walked out of the throne room be the one to walk back in. Lyriel found herself seeking his company often. At first, their conversations were formal and careful, focused on military strategy and diplomatic coordination. But gradually, they became something more. Tell me about Earth, Lyriel asked one evening. They were sitting in her private garden, watching the sun set over the crystal spires of the capital city. Tell me about where you grew up. Daniel smiled at the memory. I grew up on a colony world called New Montana. It was a hard place. The soil was rocky, the winters were long, and everything we had to earn through our own effort. It sounds difficult. It was. But it was also beautiful. The sky was a deeper blue than Earth's, and on clear nights, you could see 3 different moons. My father used to take me outside and point out the stars, telling me stories about each one. Lyriel was quiet for a moment. My mother used to tell me stories about the stars too. She said that one day I would rule all of them. Is that what you wanted? To rule everything? The Queen considered the question. I thought it was. I was raised to believe that power was the only thing that mattered. that the strong ruled and the weak served. She shook her head sadly. I was taught that respect was something you demanded, not something you earned. Daniel nodded slowly. Many civilizations believe that. The Korthans certainly do. And humans? Humans have believed it too, at various points in our history. We've had our share of tyrants and conquerors. Daniel leaned back in his chair, looking up at the fading sky. But we've also learned, over time, that power built on fear is fragile. True strength comes from something else. What? Connection. Trust. The knowledge that others stand with you, not because they fear you, but because they believe in you. He looked at her directly. The coalition works because every species in it chose to join. Nobody was conquered. Nobody was forced. They joined because they saw something worth being part of. Lyriel felt tears forming in her eyes. And you built all of that after I turned you away. Not because of what you did, Daniel said gently. We would have built it anyway. We were already building it. Your rejection just meant that Valoria wasn't part of it. Until now. The war against the Korthans lasted 3 years. It was brutal and costly, but the Alliance held. Valorian warships fought alongside coalition vessels. Valorian soldiers stood side by side with humans and dozens of other species. Technology was shared freely. Strategies were coordinated. Sacrifices were made by all. In the end, the Korthan dominion was broken. Their fleets were scattered, their leadership destroyed, their territory liberated. The peoples they had enslaved were freed and offered membership in the growing alliance. Daniel Hayes did not live to see the final victory. He died peacefully on Valoria Prime, 8 months before the war ended, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species. Queen Lyriel was at his bedside when he passed at his funeral. She spoke to the gathered assembly of humans, Valorians, and representatives from across the Alliance. 20 years ago, she said, her voice steady despite her grief, I called humanity insects. I called them vermin. I told them they were beneath us and always would be. She paused, looking out at the crowd. I was wrong. Not just factually wrong, but morally wrong. I failed to see what Daniel Hayes showed me through his silence, and later through his words, and finally through his friendship. She took a deep breath. True strength is not about domination. It is not about making others kneel. True strength is about standing up for what is right, even when it costs you everything. It is about offering second chances to those who do not deserve them. It is about believing that people can grow and change and become better than they were. She looked at the simple stone that marked Daniel's grave. Humanity taught me these lessons. Daniel Hayes taught me these lessons. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to them. After the funeral, Laura Mitchell approached the Queen. She was the last surviving member of the original diplomatic team, now elderly herself, but still sharp and active. He spoke of you often, Laura said. In his final months. Lyriel was surprised. He did? Yes. He said you reminded him of himself when he was young. Proud. Stubborn. Certain that you knew everything. Laura smiled softly. He also said that you had learned the most important lesson much faster than he did. What lesson? That being strong enough to admit you were wrong is harder than being strong enough to fight. And far more valuable. Lyriel looked up at the sky, where countless stars were beginning to appear in the darkening heavens. What happens now? She asked. Now that the war is over? Laura stood beside her, following her gaze upward. Now we build. Together. Not Valorian and human. Not empire and coalition, but one alliance. One family. Do you think we can do it? Laura reached out and took the Queen's hand. I think Daniel believed we could. And I've learned never to bet against something Daniel Hayes believed in. In the years that followed, The alliance between the Valorian Empire and the coalition of free worlds grew stronger. Trade flourished. Knowledge was shared. Borders became less important than connections. Slowly, carefully, the old suspicions and resentments faded away, and in every history book that recorded this remarkable transformation, the story began the same way. It began with a young queen who hurled insults, and a human commander who said nothing at all. Because sometimes the most powerful response is not what you say. It is what you choose not to say, and what you do instead.